I will remind you that not taking action is taking action in this.
Yeah, lack of action it's a statement that you're making. I agree.
This isn't a lean-in situation. Women are leaning in. We did that already. We're there. We're not in leadership roles. That's the system, not the leaning in. My advice would be vote with your feet.
Artificial intelligence is rapidly reshaping the life sciences industry, from drug development and clinical development to medical affairs, which you guys have heard me talk a lot about, and scientific storytelling. But here's the thing. How do we ensure that leadership, scientific judgment, and human expertise evolves alongside it? Today, I'm joined by someone who has spent their career at the intersection of science, leadership, and innovation. I'm really happy to welcome today Dr. Joanne Kamens, who has led organizations, mentored countless scientists, and helped shape the future of biotech. Joanne, welcome.
Thank you so much. What a great introduction, Will.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to have you. And your last name is pronounced Kamens?
Yeah, you got that. Midwest. Oh. It's a hard A to say.
Good. Oh, you're from the Midwest. Where are you from originally in the Midwest?
Minnesota. I grew up in St. Louis Park.
Oh, very nice. Okay, very good. Mm-hmm. So I guess before we start, for the audience that's not familiar with you or Women in Bio, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for asking. So I'm a molecular geneticist. That is my identity, although I haven't picked up a pipette in quite a long time. But as I always tell my, my colleagues, once a scientist, always a scientist. So I think like a scientist most of the time. I spent 20 years in pharma and then some years in biotech doing a cool RNAi startup. And then I was the executive director, CEO of AbbVie, a nonprofit biotech for 10 years, which is I can talk about if people are interested, is a scientific sharing organization. And all that time, starting back in my early days in pharma, I started getting interested in the issues of workplace equity. And so I did a lot of volunteer work, and I have many, many volunteer positions and roles. I'm the founder of Boston Association for Women in Science. I'm active in many other organizations and many boards. And just a few weeks ago, I've been honored to be selected as the new CEO of Women in Bio. So for the first time, I get to actually work full-time at the avocation, the hobby that I've been doing for decades. So it is an incredible honor, and I'm really, really happy to have this platform to work on equity in general. Focus on women, but in general equity. I don't just focus on women in my own work.
That's great. Well, congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
That's great that this is something I could tell that you're really passionate about, and now you can do it full time. Talk to us a little bit about how this came to your attention. What got you interested in this issue of equity in science?
Oh, well, that is a true story that some people know about me. I was in a meeting 7 years into my career at I don't know if I should name names, but I was at BASF at the time, which was acquired by AbbVie a few years after that. And I realized that I had been in meetings all week, because that's what we do in pharma, and there had been no other women in any other meeting that I attended. And my class in graduate school was 50-50 pretty much of people who identified as women or men. I think now you would probably have like a 40-40-20, not neither kind of split. And I was like, what happened? And I have to say, I had incredibly good time in college as far as equity. My graduate advisor was incredibly supportive, supported me through having a baby in graduate school, never made me feel different than anyone else in the lab. And a light bulb kind of went off. I was like, what happened? And then I realized that in our small company at the time of some hundreds, our part of BASF, some hundreds of people, I was the third most senior woman in the company. And I was just a senior scientist. I wasn't so senior. There were just no women. And so, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And that was true even then, right? So then I doubled down. I'm a scientist. I started doing research. Why is this happening? And then I got active. And that's when I founded Boston AWIS and really, and actually refounded AWIS, because there had been a chapter. But then when Title IX laws were passed, AWIS chapters said, hey, it's all fixed, no problem. Everything's going to be equal now. We have laws in place. Right. And they actually folded the chapter. And I was like, what? This is Boston. We don't have an AWIS chapter, So that was the start of my my activism, if you will.
Got it. And I guess why you were asking, yourself, you're doing the research and saying, why is this the case? Why is there maybe not as many women in science and pharma? What did you find? What was the reason?
Yeah. Well, what I found was, this precipitous drop off, its cliff at every stage. We call it a glass ceiling, but it's really just a constant escalator down for women, starting very early. And it was evident in my company. If I looked at the women who had left, most of them who had left for reasons related to their gender and their identity. And even down to the fact that one woman, was accused of, losing her temper in a meeting, and that affected her career, and she ended up moving on. And, we always know that women are, if they speak too harshly, they're judged much more harshly than people who don't identify as women. So, it just like little things like that. And so, there were just so many contributions to it. It was even obvious early on that it's these 1,000 little cuts. It's not just one bad person, although I will say there are some very bad people. There's just a few of them, but they have an oversized influence on both STEM education and, in the workplace. And then the one thing that was really shown to turn the tide was strong, supporters and mentors. And so I got involved very early on in very actively promoting mentorship programs and support programs. We have to go into sponsorship. We can't just be mentors, but we can talk about that if you like, but that wasn't happening for women. And that's the kind of work that I've been trying to do since then to try and make that happen.
And this was in what year?
Oh, so let's see. This was when I first started, it was about 98,
Okay.
97, 98. Yeah. Okay. I got out of grad school in 92. And then I worked for a few years, and then about it was like 98, 99, I started to get uncomfortable in my skin. And then all kinds of things gender related started to happen to me. I eventually left because of some things that were around that as well, and went to a biotech that was great. Had a great career, no complaints, all kinds of fun things. Monitoring and seeing, and also interacting with a lot of women who were suffering much more greatly than I was from this impact on their careers.
Do you feel now, especially since maybe the Me Too movement, that things have improved and there's greater awareness around these issues?
Oh, wow, that's a question. I am an optimistic person, so things have changed and there is some improvement in some places, but we are seeing a terrible backslide since the pandemic. The current political climate has been extremely harmful for the progress of equity, not just for women, for everyone, in fact. Even people who are from the majority that don't, they're suffering as well, because we know that, diversity is good for the workplace. We know it. There's a business case for it. And so everyone's really suffering from the lack of attention to these matters. So there's been a downturn. I mean, you may know some of the numbers. Internationally, 42% of workers are women, but in top roles, it's only about 25%. So that's international, reflected in United States statistics as well. In some areas, it's worse than that, some better, but you get an idea. We reached a peak of women in leadership roles in 2022, and then it's been steadily declining every year since then. But I believe that organizations that have taken this seriously are moving ahead. I think organizations that were behaving in a performative way are giving up and not, they were just doing it for a perform. They didn't really buy in or really adapt to say, we want to really be inclusive because it's better for the business. The companies that do that in the long run are going to be more successful, and the performative companies are going to suffer. That's what's happening, in my opinion. That's my optimistic thing, that there's still a lot of great people out there doing really great work. And for example, we have many, many people sponsoring women in bio. We have many companies sponsoring women in bio because they want to demonstrate to their employees that they're kind of still all in. And it is a great way to demonstrate that. And then we've had a few companies say, oh, no, thank you. Women is in your name. We're not going to support you. We can't do that politically. And I think those people didn't care in the first place, those organizations. And so this is just an out for them to not do that work. Did that answer your question? I feel like
it does. No, it does. I'm asking these questions because I know that people listening in the audience are going to have these questions, right? They're going to wonder about these things. So I have to ask them. I guess one of the things I'm wondering when you said that is because someone said to you, hey, women's in the name of the organization, women in bio. Why? What does it have to do with supporting it or not? I'm not
Oh,
following.
well, any organization that supports a subgroup, and of course, we are humans, we are made up of multiple subgroups, right?
Right.
So when you look at inclusion, uh, everyone is an individual. You may look like the majority, but you may have a mental health disability that sets you aside, that is invisible. There's a huge number of inclusion issues that involve invisible differences,
Sure.
right? So inclusion in general as a practice is super important. Now, why do I focus on women? Well, for a few reasons. It's one of my identities, but also, a huge percentage of people identify as women and they suffer just for that. They may have compounding identities that make it even harder, but that's one of the largest. Actually, you know what the largest inclusion group is? Is actually
No.
disability.
Yeah.
Because in the end,
Yeah.
we're all going to have one. Okay.
Yes.
And as we
Right.
get
Yeah.
older, like, I'm a little harder for me to see the screen now at my age, like I am
Right.
starting to have hearing and vision disabilities and differences. I'm not trying to downplay the importance of race or, LGBTQ
No,
identity,
I get where you're coming from.
but
By
like
the way,
we're all going to suffer from a lack of
yeah.
inclusion. Okay.
By the way, my question actually was,
Yeah.
why do those organizations, why they say to
Oh,
you, we're not going to support it
yeah.
because it has the name women? I'm just
Right.
curious why they
They
said.
they claim that they'll suffer politically if they're noticed as supporting. Now,
Oh, I see.
so for example, there's some places where the current administration can tell an organization you will not get money if you don't change your ways. And of
Hmm.
course, we know there's pressure being put on institutions of higher learning and other organizations. Now, most companies, the rules about what you can do and not do are not really changed. You are allowed
Right.
to drive for inclusion in your organization. But I think for performative companies, this is an excuse to say, why waste resources on this? We don't need our people officers anymore. And let's fire all the diversity and equity and inclusion officers. And by the way, we're not going to sponsor women in bio because it's a biased organization. The fact is, we are not of women in bio. We are for women in bio. Everyone is welcome. And that is true at our programs. That is true at our sponsorship and events and allies and supporters. We're not going to make change just by ourselves. We need everybody. So those organizations are saying, we will suffer. We can't do this because we'll get noticed. And, maybe some of the larger organizations would be a target of political backlash. But for the vast majority of organizations, it's just an excuse to, fire some people and
Yeah.
downplay the importance. Yeah.
Or not take action. Just
Not
basically
take
announce.
action.
Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
passive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. For them not to
Well,
support.
but I will remind you that not taking action is taking
Yeah.
action.
Yeah. That's a good
Okay.
point. Yeah. Yeah. Lack of action it's a statement that you're making. I
It is a
agree.
statement. It is a statement.
Talk to me a little bit about Women in Bio as an organization. Maybe for again, maybe the audience members that aren't as familiar, a little bit about some of your activities, your events, some of the goals. You talk about the mentorship program. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Women in Bio is an amazing organization. I've been peripherally involved for many years with Women in Bio. It hasn't been like my home organization, but I have worked with the Boston chapter for many years. So this was a real honor for me. Women in Bio has so many benefits and aspects to people that get involved and support it. It's a strong community. It's a strong place to learn. It's a strong place to practice leadership skills. It's a strong place to meet people for career flexibility and versatility. It's a super supportive community. We're in 14 cities. We do a lot of virtual national programming, educational, supportive, inspirational, all the things that we need to support. In fact, all genders can come to our events. They're all fantastic. And we really welcome everyone to learn and grow with us. We also have integrated mentoring programs of many different types. Executive, mid-career, groups, one-on-one. It's quite a whole spectrum of depending on the chapter. I'm working on making a national mentoring program that's virtual. I'm really excited about that as a new opportunity. And those programs are, constantly giving, women more connection, more support that they need. All the participants get involved, mentees, mentors, it doesn't matter. Everyone benefits from mentoring programs.
Okay.
And then we have social programming, super fun, creating community. A lot of people, especially with the work at home, and in STEM, you have a mixture of people who have to be at the bench perhaps, or, working virtually. A lot of people are quite isolated now, and the in-person events are I don't think you can network only virtually. And so the in-person events are a fantastic place to grow community. Then we have also a giant executive women in bio program, which is amazing. Some very, very influential and senior women. Many women executives are involved in the various chapters, and they have sub events and meetups. And, again, if you can see it, you can be it. So it's really important for people to get together as they navigate executive roles. To that end, we have a national program called Boardroom Ready, which I love because these are a bunch of women who are already ready for the boardroom, but we help them gain visibility and up their leadership potential to become attractive to boards. 70% of our first 5 cohorts are women that have already gotten director seats after their participation. So it's quite successful. Yeah. We just launched our latest 10th anniversary cohort. So that's very exciting. We show up annually at Bio because Women in Bio at Bio, WIB at Bio. Bio's been a sponsor and a partner with WIB for many years. And
are you guys part of Bio or no?
Not like part of Bio, but Women at Bio is like a thing, an identity that we hold. And they've sponsored us for many years, supported our participation. And we have events during Bio. And we'll also have events at JP Morgan this year. So, and we have had events in the past at JP Morgan. So we have a few national visibility. And the purpose of national is to bring a one WIB feel. Really, we're here to support the chapters and make sure that every volunteer has a fantastic experience. I have an amazing, tiny staff working very hard. And they really love what they do and are super supportive of the mission to, advance equity and give women the leadership, skills and confidence that they need. One of my pet peeves is the imposter syndrome. We're always giving women confidence. And to be honest, I actually think women have all the confidence they need. It's not, even the people who coined the term imposter syndrome don't believe in it anymore, because it implies that it's like your fault, like you have a lack of confidence. What's actually happening is it's a phenomena, whereas you have been mistreated. And you are not imagining that, your confidence is being attacked and your capabilities are being attacked. You probably have experienced that in your career if you are a woman in the workplace. And so it's not really a syndrome, it's a phenomena. And so I like to work with women and clients to work through that in a way that helps them understand that they're not imagining it. And so it's usually the case, they are not imagining it. So that is one of my most common sort of coaching questions is, did I get this wrong? Or, did this person just say this because I was a woman? I'm like, no, they probably did, because they started their sentence with honey. So probably that's what they were talking about, so.
I think, it's interesting. We probably, as human beings, we all have these inherent biases, and some are probably they're inadvertent. They come out naturally. And you're right. I mean, there's probably the treatment of people based on their gender or the race or religious background, etc. I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. I think those things happen sometimes and you don't even think about it, that that you might have had a bias in your mind. So it's not always necessarily something that's done on purpose, but I think the issue is, which I think you're bringing up, it's an important issue, that the awareness around it, right, and making sure that there's equity there and how you treat those folks is really, really critical. You'll be actually very happy to hear. So I don't know how much you know about the organizations that I run. So I run a company called the ACMA, which established, standards of excellence for pharma and biotech across the world, really. So, but I also run a hedge fund. You'll be happy to hear. So one of the areas that I've been really focused on in the hedge fund is women's health.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's an area we do public equities, but we also do a lot of private equity work, and very interested in women's health, especially, longevity and looking at different aspects of women's health. And I think that's an area that probably hasn't been looked at very carefully. So we focus on metabolic dysfunction, but also on women's health. So it's something we should probably talk about at some point. I'm sure there could be a lot of areas of synergy.
You're very smart to do so, because you've obviously realized there's money there. So and we're happy as people who identify as women, we are happy to see that the world finally realized that Oh yeah, we are, somewhere from 40 to 60% of the consumers.
Yeah.
That is a smart tactic, I would
Yeah.
say.
Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes I make good decisions. Yeah. But
Okay.
I think it's important. So we should definitely talk, and I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of synergy there. Um, you talked before about getting, folks boardroom ready. Talk to me about your shift. So you were, like you mentioned, a molecular geneticist, I think you said,
Yep.
and now you're in an executive leadership role. What's that mind shift, I guess been like? What is the biggest mindset shift, sorry, you've had to make? What's that been like?
Oh, I love that question. No one's asked me that really. Mind shift. Well, I went from I don't see the career as like, I didn't have like a goal, like, it's more like what comes next, I'm much more, and when the job to be the head of Addgene came along, if you would have asked me in grad school, hey, you're going to be a CEO someday, Joanne, I would have said, maybe a CSO, never a CEO. That's never going to
Right.
happen. And for a variety of reasons, I was uniquely qualified for that role. So interviewing for it was a little bit like interviewing for women in bio, where people were like, hey, you're really qualified for this role. It had just been my journey to kind of get there. And I had really great mentors. So when I was in biotech, I made a shift to the business side to do BD from a science perspective, like alliance management. And the mentor I had there, Ramani Varanasi, really drove me. She was an amazing mentor. And if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been able to move into an executive role. Do you know what I mean? So it's like each opportunity brings you to a new place. So the mind shift, so I always really cared about managing people as humans, as individuals. And so that wasn't a shift. But that was the most important thing that I brought with me, that everyone's different, needs different things, and it's your job as a leader to get each of them what they need to be successful. And so I saw my job as a company lead, as a company head, my job was really to retain people and make them, successful and happy. And I think you need both of those things. Not everything's fun, but, your job needs to be rewarding, respectful, all those things, right? So that I took with me. I think the biggest change is, as a bench scientist, I'm extremely detail oriented, very focused on every well in that 96 well plate, well, back before everything was automated, we did it with pipettes. But back in the day, every single well mattered. And I think when you move into a leadership role, you have to delegate and trust people to take care of their own wells. That's how I see it. And so I really became sort of a radical delegator. I'm almost too good of a delegator. So when I've assigned a task, I'm done with it. You have the task. Ask me questions. I will give you feedback if you ask me, but I'm assuming you're going to get it done. And so I'm the opposite of a micromanager unless I'm asked to step in. I really trust people and grow them and let them have and that means sometimes I don't like the font, or maybe I'd pick a different color, but you can't run that many people and not let them have their own fingerprint on their work. So I think that's the biggest change, is from that really looking at every well to saying, oh, that plate looks good, pass it on, you did a good job, and otherwise I wouldn't have the time. Either you don't have enough resources to be looking at everything when you're in a leadership role. So that was probably the biggest shift. That's what I took with me, was the individual people as individuals, and the biggest shift was letting them do their thing, I think.
Yeah. Letting go. Yeah. That could be hard sometimes, because you feel like, you want to have your hand in everything, but ultimately, to your point,
yeah,
you have to delegate. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to ask you a question. Again, a lot of people probably have this question on their minds.
sure.
Obviously, we're talking about inclusion. We know that the current administration has scaled back supporting some DEI initiatives. I guess, what are your thoughts on that? And then second, if you're a pharma biotech leader, a lot of people listening to these podcasts are leaders in the biotech companies and pharma companies. What can they do to build high performing cultures where they support diversity and inclusion and things like that?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. How do I feel? I'm deeply saddened as a mother of daughter and a grandmother of two granddaughters. I'm deeply saddened by the backslide in progress for everyone, not just for women, but for everyone. I think some dramatically frightening decisions are being made in high places, and I think it is frustrating, but I still work and meet with a lot of people who care about progress, and 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I'm okay with that. I think we have made steps forward. You asked that before, and um, I think that people who really care about these issues, will begin, maybe not right this moment, but as the years go on, I think they will step up and start, continuing to support the need for inclusion in the workplace and in the world in general. I'm also Jewish, and it's a terrifying time, as the rise in anti-Semitism is shocking, and not just shocking, but deadly. There's no nice way to say it. I've been accused in the Jewish community of not being vocal enough about that. And why am I so stuck on women? Well, I'm a woman, I'm Jewish. It's kind of both things are important to me. And I actually had someone once ask me, Jews are getting killed right now for being Jewish, and that is happening. But when was the last time a woman got killed just for being a woman? And I'm like, 5 seconds ago, maybe. And now again, probably now, one more. So we still have work to do. I don't mean to be depressing. We still have work to do on a very basic level of safety and bias that leads to hatred. But we are lucky; most of us aren't exposed to that, and we're in a workplace where you can be with colleagues who make you feel safe and honored, and work with them. So what can leadership do? I think, so at Addgene, this was really my goal. When I entered Addgene, I saw it as my little petri dish, because I got to decide what were we going to do about inclusion, So for me, I was always experimenting with what things worked. And I had less than 7% turnover for the 10 years that I was in the lead at Addgene, which is in a nonprofit biotech space almost unheard of, I would say. And why did I do that? Because I worked incredibly hard on inclusion and retention. So I saved a lot of money by people not quitting. Everybody knows how hard it is when there's turnover. Sure. You lose the brain, you lose the knowledge base, you lose time, you lose money. And we couldn't afford that because we're a nonprofit, a profitable nonprofit, but a nonprofit just the same. And so I really saw it as my job. And as I was there over the years, we really increased the racial diversity. LGBTQ inclusion was excellent, and meant that it was an attractive place for people to work because they felt safe and included. So we got great employees, great people who might have wanted to go work somewhere that paid more, but instead chose to work with us. We had a number of programs around inclusion, around disability, different ability, mental ability, but right job, right person. So, saved us some money and had some great dedicated employees by not having people turn over in certain roles. A lot of real positive work. We were very successful with our work there. And I think that work continues. The current CEO is equally committed to these issues. So, and the founders were as well. So that was where I learned to see that, hey, all these things that I tell you that I think can work, they actually work. They work. And so what did that involve? It involved attention, really paying attention to these issues not from someone delegated, like I have a people person, they take care of it. I had to get involved and take care of it. We spent a lot of our funds on supporting organizations like Women in Bio, involvement in Women in Bio, the Mass LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. We were founding members. There were a lot of organizations that we worked with. Best Buddies, we worked with many, I couldn't even name them. If I start to list, I'll forget someone. Dozens of organizations that we funded, supported, gave space to. And what that did is it demonstrated to our employees, and they told us what was important to them. It demonstrated to them that we were serious about what we were saying. We want to support you, and we're going to give you outlets, opportunities, communities to support your identity, and we want to help you here, And that worked. I'm just going to say it worked. Like we had an increase in diversity, an increase in retention, strong retention. And, I think any company can make those steps, and we partner with so many organizations, and it gives an opportunity for all their employees to participate with us and to feel the messages and live the messages of we're trying to do better, and there has been progress. Like, to tell you one story, when I was back at Abbott, or it was BASF at the time again, I had a baby, and I wanted to make milk for the baby while I was at work, and there was no place in the building for me to do that. Giant building made for 600 people. We only had 150 people at the time, and they were like, no, we don't have a place for that. I'm like, do it in the bathroom. I'm like, well, that's not acceptable. You wouldn't eat your lunch in the bathroom. I'm not going to make my baby's lunch in the bathroom. So we need a different solution. No, can't do it. Okay, I have an office, but my office is glass. Can I put up curtains or posters on the wall so I can use my office? No, that is against the rules. You're not allowed to do that. My boss has an office with no windows. Can I switch with him? He's willing. No, you can't switch. Only bosses can have that office. You can't have that. And in those days, we had desktop computers, so you couldn't just switch. IT would have to come and switch your whole setup, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I spent 7 years actually trying to get a health room, a wellness room somewhere in the building. Never succeeded. And about 2 years ago, I was invited back to speak there as part of, in my capacity as being on the National AWIS board. And I had a lot of friends still working there, a lot of old colleagues, and I said, hey, before I speak, I just want to ask a question. Do we have a wellness room? And they're like, oh yeah, there's one on every floor. I was like, okay, now I can tell this story. Otherwise I couldn't tell the story.
Right.
So, organizations have, now we take that for granted. Right. So that's a change, right? That's a slow change, but it's a change. You wouldn't go into a workplace now, and if someone said to you, no, I'm sorry, we don't have any place for you to make milk for your baby. Not that more women aren't dropping out of the workforce anyway, because of other factors involved. And that's a different problem. But there is some accountability. There is some change. There is some where there's just the standards are risen and changed of expectation in some places. So I like to grab onto every little bit of progress. And to me, those things feel like progress.
First of all, I appreciate you being so vulnerable too and sharing, the fact that you're Jewish and there's a lot of anti-Semitism. I was wondering, as you were kind of going through, a lot of it is probably related to also lack of education and understanding, right? So whatever the discrimination is against religion, race, sexual orientation, etc. Because people can disagree, right? That's okay. People have disagreeing points of view, but I think, at least for me, I think the issue comes in where you're treating someone differently because of their bloodline or their religion or their gender or their socioeconomic status, right?
Of course, yeah.
It could be a variety of different things. So I think that goes back to just a lack of education, awareness, understanding, being trained on those things to have a better understanding. How much do you think that plays a role? I mean, our organization, the ACMA, we're all about education, certification, providing standards for people. Obviously, we focus on different things, right? With functional, competencies for the job. But how much of that do you think plays a role and does Women in Bio provide any training or things like that for companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I mean, education and the web. I mean, now you can, if you're going down a rabbit hole of misinformation, it's hard to tell what's real and what's not for people. And yeah. I mean, we've seen this in the downturn in appreciating science and understanding, reality. I mean, it's having deadly effects actually when it comes to healthcare and science and medical, care. People go online, they see something they think is true, and they die from it because that's a bad choice. So I think. I don't know. I'm not an expert on, the plight of people on the internet. I think a lot of it is exposure to other people and communication and knowledge. And I think creating platforms for people who are different to speak is really a good way. So, WIB absolutely provides platforms like that. We can, do programs in your organizations, with organizations, so they can actually hear from the women that have had these experiences. And like you say, sometimes it's just inadvertent. And there's advertent action as well, but there's inadvertent action, that's not intentional. And sometimes it's really, it just takes a conversation to see it. So I think one of my most flagrant examples of that is the movie Picture a Scientist. I don't know if you've ever seen that. There's a documentary called Picture a Scientist about 4 particular women who really tried to break through barriers of discrimination, pretty serious discrimination and exclusion in their labs. And one of the women was a geology graduate student in the Boston area. And her advisor, they would go on field outings with her and 8 men. And her advisor teased her mercilessly, made fun of her when she had to go behind a rock to go to the bathroom, commented about her period in front of all the other students, threw rocks at her while she was, it was like offered to share his tent with her, it actually set her up to sleep in a tent with another man on purpose as the sleeping arrangements. Like really, it was like flagrant discrimination, and which can happen in the academy even now because there's a lack of accountability there. There's nobody taking care of it. There's no repercussions. And in a company that would probably not happen anymore. So she, anyway, this is her story. She managed to succeed. She's still a scientist, unbelievably. She stuck it out. But one of her classmates, who's a good friend of hers, said he was there at the time, saw it happening and did nothing. Didn't understand. He thought that she thought it was funny because what could she do except laugh in that situation out in the field with 8 men who they had to work together to be safe as a group, on an encampment, right? What was she going to do except laugh when her supervisor treated her this way? And he was horrified at his own behavior. He said, how could I not understand what that was like for her? And I really admired him for going on national documentary camera and saying, wow, did I mess up? So that's where, when I said to you, inaction is action. Yep. All it would have taken was those other guys who were probably just nice, normal guys. The advisor I have no sympathy for, but and they could have said, hey, cut it out. This is not okay. And then she would have been okay. Like she would have felt safe, protected, able to do her work, and he would have been shut up, but they were silent. They were silent. And so that's the situation we're in. Everyone can perform allyship when they see these things. You've all seen it. You've been in a meeting where some woman's been told to be quiet because she's too strident, or her idea is overlooked until someone else brings it up, or you've all seen it. It happens to everybody, and even each one of those little times that you take the time to make a difference, and each time that you take your money and you sponsor a WIB event, you tell your team that you care. You tell your team that you're there to hear them. And those are the kinds of activities. I'm not expecting everyone to dedicate 100% of their time like I have to changing the workplace. That's a choice I've made at this point in my career. I didn't do it for a long time at 100%. I'm just asking everyone to dedicate a modicum amount of their time, time, talent, treasure to making change. And that anyone can make a difference by doing that.
Well, we should definitely, talk maybe afterwards, but the ACMA, one of the programs that we have, actually a few of the programs that we have, they really focus on helping people build careers in the pharmaceutical and biotech industry, sure. Whether you're a pharmaceutical sales rep or medical liaison. And I don't know if you know, but the majority of people that work in the field force are women. Pharmaceutical reps and medical liaisons, and the majority are pharmacists actually on the medical side, and the majority of pharmacists are actually women. My wife actually, she's a pharmacist by training, and actually similar to you. She founded years ago an organization called Pharmacist Moms, which was, and a lot of the stories that you're talking about, she would tell me about, which was crazy. But women who are working in a retail pharmacy on their feet for 12 hours a day, and they were pregnant, or they had to do they were nursing, and so they had to go and pump, and they didn't have anywhere to go to pump, and a lot of difficult stories she would tell me. It was very, very tough. So I could relate to a lot of what you're saying just from, talking to her about some of these stories. But one of the things I learned was that, the majority of pharmacists today in the United States are women. So, helping support them by giving them education they need to give more options, right? More career options in the pharmaceutical industry, I think is really, really important. And to that point, obviously, you have a tremendous amount of experience and training. What would you tell, a 20-something-year-old Ph.D. or pharmacist who is a woman who's trying to build their career in the pharmaceutical industry, trying to build their career in science in general? What would be some of the advice you'd give them as they're entering the job market now in 2026?
Wow, what a great question. Well, you have great questions. I love that one. I don't get asked that very often. What would I tell them? Okay, I will say one thing first. Yes, women need to find community. I'm going to just say people need to find community. I don't know what men do. They do it a different way, but everybody needs community. for their career. You don't get jobs and opportunities without having community. So everybody needs community and support. Sometimes having community that looks like you and has your identities is helpful in working through some of these issues, right? But it's not just us needing to change. The workplace needs to change. This isn't a lean-in situation. Women are leaning in. We did that already, okay? Like, as you say, the numbers are there. We're there. We're not in leadership roles. That's the system, not the leaning in. So the workplace needs to continue to change as well. So my advice would be, vote with your feet. You have talent. You bring your resource. So if your organization doesn't have women on the board, women in leadership, is not a WIB sponsor, is not a, LGBTQ Pride Month sponsor, is not a, doesn't have programs for inclusion, for disability and accommodation, look at what the organizations have. And if they're performative about those things, then try to go somewhere else. I know sometimes you just need a job. I have been in that situation. But for the most part, when you can choose your job, you want to move yourself to some place where this is an effort being made on the part of your organization as well, that the organization is leaning in. Because you have the resources to vote with. And I don't want to staff those companies that are mistreating people, of any type of people. And so I guarantee you that in an organization where people who identify as women are being mistreated, there are other issues, okay? They're not the only problem that you're going to be experiencing. So my advice is to start early and often, seeking out opportunities and leadership and opportunities in places where you see a track record of work on this area.
Excellent. All right. So as we round out here, and maybe can you tell the audience where they can learn more about your organization, get resources, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I am always happy to talk to people. We are at womeninbio.org. We are all over LinkedIn. You can follow national or one of our 14 chapters in the US and one in Canada. We have 4 new chapters forming, very exciting. If you want to start a chapter because you are in an outpost that doesn't have one, get in touch with me. I would love to talk to you. And if you are a sponsor, I will tell you that we've had a number of sponsors that have, because of those reasons I said, I think they were in a performative situation, have retracted sponsorship in this year and in the last year. So we are actively seeking sponsors. When you sponsor Women in Bio, you get involved. It's not just a throw it over the fence. We're going to work with you. I'm going to come visit. We're going to, do stuff with your employees. You're going to have memberships. It's a really robust partnership package. So that's why. And by the way, I should just also say, I have been involved in many great organizations doing this work. This is the one I work for right now. I support them all. So I don't want to, if you found another organization that works for your company, you should keep doing that, okay? But you can also support us because we are really, have a really lot of advantages for your employees, so.
Very good. Well, Joanne, it was a real pleasure speaking with you and getting to learn more about you and Women in Bio. And I wish you the best of luck in the new role.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.